Before I conclude today's dialogue, however, I'd like to thank the panelists for another extremely informative session and an equally lively dialogue that ensued, interactive dialogue that ensued. So thank you for this afternoon session. I would also like to thank on behalf of all panelists the plurinational state of Bolivia for sponsoring the event. I would like to thank the General Assembly, the President of the General Assembly, Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, the Division for the Sustainable Development Goals, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the conference services, the interpreters, and the audience, both the one present here and the one remotely following us, for their participation. And I'd like to conclude with the way in which, inspired actually by our invitation before, I would like to conclude with the way in which in Australia we begin all public events by acknowledging the country that we're sharing today. And of course, country is a contested geopolitical concept, one that evokes an idea of belonging, an idea of possession, an idea of sovereignty. But in Australia, country is conceived of as something more than that, as the legacy of a worldview that far predates the colonial event and has continued unchanged throughout that event. In the words of Deborah Burt-Rose, country is the nexus of identity and interconnectedness. And as my mentors have taught me, Uncle Charles Moran and Auntie Barbara Nicholson, country is the total sum of all the beings and phenomena with which we share this space today. Country is the total sum of the relationships with and among such beings and phenomena. And furthermore, country is the totality of the stories within which these relationships are construed. And so with this in mind, I'd like to pay my respect to the honors and custodians of these stories, the elders, the ones who were, the ones who are, and the ones who are yet to be. And since country is not just a moment in space, but it's also a moment in time, I'd really like to acknowledge that country is the relationship that we are having today. And I cannot say how unexpressible an honor it has been for me to moderate this dialogue, an honor that really goes beyond words. So I would like to thank you for sharing this day with me and with all the panelists today. We've heard today how education, climate action, and civil society are profoundly intertwined in the collective response to rapid environmental changes, all articulated around the central fulcrum, represented by a host of legal responses. This is understandable since law, as environmental lawyer James Thornton suggests, is the language of global institutions. However, we have also heard that legal transformation alone appears insufficient to capture the semantic shift that is occurring. At the core of this profound ontological shift is a plethora of distinct terms and concepts: Mother Earth approach, Earth jurisprudence, rights of nature, ecological jurisprudence. Yet, these are not fixed concepts with unchanging meaning. Rather, they are heuristic devices used to engage with complex and multifaceted ideas. Nature, as Kate Soper suggests, is a promiscuous concept. It does not exist in a self-evident absolute sense, but rather is construed within distinct social and linguistic communities. In fact, many of the world languages do not have a word or a single word that translates literally nature. If I can use the words of Brian Swim and Joanna Macy to describe this interplay between linguistic, social, and human communities with their environment. Every place we went, they write, we became that place. That is the brilliant power provided by symbolic consciousness. With their cultural inventions, humans could adapt to new environments much more quickly than would be the case if they had to rely solely upon genetic changes. That's why the humans who decided to follow the reindeer rapidly became reindeer people. They walked the same pathways as the reindeer. They ate some of the same food. At night, in their feasts and their dancing, they celebrated the thrill of being the reindeer people. Other humans aligned themselves with the whales and became the whale people. Some identified with the birds and began wearing feathers and greeting each dawn with song. The highest fulfillment became the act of joining with the birds' celebration. The early humans did not just journey through Earth's walls. The spirits of each world captivated their imaginations as they revisioned their lives in terms of that place. They absorbed every color and sound into their life and soul. Now, this multiplicity of approaches, however, all these multiple approaches, however, share one thing, and that is the rejection of a particular form of anthropocentrism, one that sees human beings existing above and, more importantly, outside the network of relations with the surrounding cosmos. This worldview is seen as not only blatantly incorrect. Imagine what would happen to humans if oxygen were suddenly to disappear. But it's seen as actively detrimental. The rejection of this worldview is bound to engender new and diverse economic realities, shaped by novel and varied market forces. At the center of this profound change, however, lies the understanding that collective unity is and must be predicated on diversity. Since the idea of nature is inherently plural, harmony depends on respecting, protecting, and even nurturing diversity. Diversity of cultures, diversity of life, diversity of natures. In this lies, I believe, the most powerful lesson of a reconstituted harmony with nature, in the deep appreciation of the many ways of being that life, and not just human life, but all life, has imagined. And so I'd like to conclude this ninth dialogue on harmony with nature with the beautiful words with which anthropologist Wade Davis begins his book, The Wayfinders. One of the intense pleasures of travel is the opportunity to live amongst peoples who have not forgotten the old ways, who still feel their past in the wind, touch it in stones polished by rain, taste it in the bitter leaves of plants. Just to know that in the Amazon, jaguar shamans still journey beyond the Milky Way, that myths of the Inuit elders still resonate with meaning, that the Buddhists in Tibet still pursue the breadth of the Dharma, is to remember the central revelation of anthropology. The idea that the world in which we live does not exist in some absolute sense, but rather is simply one model of reality, the consequence of one set of intellectual and spiritual choices that our particular cultural lineage made, however successfully, many generations ago. And this teaches us that there are other options, other possibilities, other ways of thinking and interacting with the earth. This is an idea that can only fill us with hope. So, with these words of hope, I would like to conclude this ninth interactive dialogue on harmony with nature. And I thank you once again for participating today. The meeting is adjourned.